In this video, we'll be exploring human system theory. And the first thing to understand is why we need a system, why we need a theory. And to begin this, we have to look at the nature of consciousness, which is innately linked to language. What I mean by that is, if you want to think a thought, if you want to be conscious of an arena, inside or out, subjectively or objectively, you need to put that arena of consciousness into language, or you are not conscious that you are conscious of it. Meaning, the lens through which the consciousness is viewing reality, the human ego, is not conscious of what it is viewing without language. And you can test this out by trying to think a single thought without using words. Words are the containers, are the distinctions used for a human ego to map one part of reality in juxtaposition with another. These distinctions are called words. 1 inch is different than 2 inches. Why? Because they sound different. And because in spatial terms, they're different widths. Width is also a word, which sounds different than length. And so we're basically taking the circle, we're taking the whole, and we're zeroing in and zooming in on certain pieces of that whole that seem relevant to our human needs: survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, development of personal abilities and gifts, integrating those gifts powerfully into the world, and moving beyond those to a sense of transcendence, to a sense of something bigger than ourselves. Every human being has these needs, and underlying the momentum of these needs is a shared and common drive to increase our sustainable feeling of felt well-being and to decrease our chronic suffering. Every human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably good and wanted to avoid feeling chronically bad. And this leads to an unfolding process. It leads to a guidance system of pain, separation from, and longing for, and joy, well-being, beauty, truth, the ideal. So we have these 2 points on a continuum, moving towards what is more beautiful, moving towards what is healthier, moving towards what is more pleasurable, what is more good, more true, because it feels good. Because when we do that, we increase our sustainable well-being and decrease our chronic suffering through a hierarchy of human needs. Now, this in and of itself is a series of systems. It's a series of systems using language. Hierarchy is a system. Needs, a system. Hierarchy of needs, a combined system. Survival, security, love and belonging, and self-esteem in a paradigm of hierarchy of needs, 3 systems working together. Now, why do we need systems? We need systems because reality is so big relative to the fractal representation of reality that is the human ego. So if you look at the fractal patterns of mathematics, we see that the atom has subcomponents that look a little bit like the solar system, the protons and the electrons rolling around each other, the particle and the wave, the dot and the space between the dots, the masculine and feminine polarity. The atoms of our body synergize to create a universe of a body. The sense of consciousness on a larger collective level is fractally represented by the human ego. We can see this the way the individual child contains within it the knowledge of the entire family system, the way the family system contains within it the knowledge of the entire cult or culture, the way a culture contains within it the knowledge, the patterns of the entire evolution of that culture and its various bifurcation points. As humans distinguish themselves from human animals, as blacks distinguish themselves from whites, as southern cultures distinguish themselves from northern cultures, that there is a fractal representation in these journeys. And if we look at the deep fractal representation of the birthing process of a human being, where we go from this little amoeba-like structure to growing in a watery environment, to coming out on dry land, the fractal representation of consciousness that begins with the reptilian crocodile brain that's 200 million years old, moves into the limbic brain of just beginning to feel conscious of reactive emotions, moving into the rational brain that's able to extrapolate based on pattern recognition, moving into the more human areas of the brain, the empathic brain, the brain that is capable of empathizing, of functioning consciously within the ego as if we are part of something bigger than ourselves, something we did unconsciously before there was an ego, to function instinctively, unconsciously, as if we were part of a larger whole that we are scientifically connected to. And so within this series of microcosms and macrocosms, where you can see the entire development of human consciousness in the movement from the brainstem, the reptilian crocodile brain, the limbic mammalian brain, the rational brain as one's becoming self-aware, as the human animal is becoming more human, the human being able to empathize and feel and be self-aware. And then the transcendent brain, which we've touched on almost nothing, which less than 1% of the population actively utilizes as a primary software for navigating reality. We can see the entire evolution of hundreds of millions of years of animal development just in this microcosm of the human brain. And in the birthing process of a fetus, we relive the evolution, the cycle of emergent complexity on the planet as a whole. Now, these things are hard to track, but they're impossible to become conscious of without language. And the human brain is very narrow in its tracking and holding capacity. You know, if you give me a 10-digit phone number, it's like, where do I put 10 digits? If I can say one digit, I can probably remember it. All, you know, you're 7, you're 2, you're 3, you're 7, you're 2. But 10 digits, I got to write that down. We've got to write it down. Why? Because after about 10 digits, most of us do not have the technology, the system that expert memorists have, where they'll create a palace of memory and different images and stuff. We don't have a system for memorizing. So I was like, it's too much. 10 digits. So we're dealing with a very limited processing capacity. Kind of like RAM, you know, where, you know, if you have 1 gigabyte of RAM on a desktop. It's not enough these days. And so you open your email program, you can probably do that with a gigabyte of RAM. Remember when it was 256 megabytes of RAM, right? Well, programs had to be very small. And you had to shut one to open another, and then shut that one to open another. You couldn't just open, 5 different programs moving between this. It's too much. The RAM in human consciousness is very limited, and we do not have an effective technology for expanding that RAM. What we do have is an effective technology for directing attention. And so you can think of the blueprint of a large architecture project. And if you look at a $25 million architectural project that's been laid out, in print form, you'll have big 3x4 pieces of paper, and you'll go through it. This is the site plan, this stuff here. This is the house footprint. This is the layers, the profiles of the first floor, the second floor. These are the walls. This is the electrical layer. This is the lighting layer. This is the heating layer. This is the alarm layer. This is the fire sprinkler layer. This is the landscaping layer. This is the paint color layers. Here's where you see what every room and every face of every wall will be painted. There's swatches of paint, so this is the design for the painting. And this is how the molding and stuff will look. So you have all of these different sections. And when you put it all together, you have an integrated system. But you cannot the human brain is incapable of just doing that and doing it intuitively. And so you do it step by step. First you do the site plan. Then you do the house design and stuff. Then you set the house on the site. And you do this in stages. Why? Because we have the ability to direct attention to a limited number of variables at a given time. And so, is this land something that I like? Do I like the view from this land? We can ask 10 questions about land. I like the view, I like the neighborhood, I'm buying the land, right? Very simple equation. Okay, now that I've bought the land, do I want the house on the upper part, the lower house, how big? I can do that equation. It's simple. Because the human brain at any given moment is competent to make an average of maybe, it's able to synthesize maybe an average of 4 things. So I like the view here, I like the view there, we'll do that. Okay, now that we've decided that, what about should it be a concrete, a modern, this house? 4 things, right? Asian this, I want it modern and square and uncomfortable and bold, like I'm an important person, right? So let's go to great expense to make it look plain and ordinary. Okay, then we made that decision. Okay, now that we've decided that, then what have we got available? So we could do, do we want to bring in rustic factory-looking things? Do we want to do all glass? What's our thing? Are we going to be impressive by cantilevering things? What's that? And we pick 3 or 4 things there. And we work our way through within the RAM capacity of the human brain. And so we need systems, because systems are the things that prompt us. Like what we're talking about is a system for buying and developing a house. First you do a budget system. Then you do an area system. Then you do a land location system. Then you do a land buying system, or a house remodel and buying system. Then you do a bank application system. But you have a system that threads these various systems together. And as a result, you get a house. Because if you don't have a system that links your systems, you buy the land and you sit around waiting. And it's like, where's the house? I bought the land, where's the house? Isn't it supposed to just happen magically? It's like, no. There's a system for designing the house. Okay, what is that system? What do I do? Help me design my house. Well, there's a system of asking you a series of questions. How will you use it? Well, okay, what are those questions? Oh, that's too many questions. So there's a system of asking the questions in sequence. And then there's a system of synthesizing, like I want a $2 million house and I have $100,000. So there's a system for integrating that discrepancy. So what are you going to do? Are you going to earn another $1.8 million? Are you going to borrow another $1.8 million? Or are you going to reduce your house to $200,000? Or are you going to do this and this and this? There's a system for synthesizing that. And some systems work better than others. And we're talking about grace. Because here's the thing to understand system. We need systems, and we need crude systems to match the low RAM capacity of human consciousness. But we want grace. We want grace, but we need crude. The RAM in our heads demands simple systems, but our yearning is for grace. Now, if we understand the fractal nature of reality, the spiral nature of reality, and the geometry of reality, one of the things that emerges as one of the most interesting shapes in geometry is the sphere. Why the sphere? Why does the sphere stand out in this search for grace? Well, think of all the experimentation that went on to develop the wheel. Why do we have wheels instead of squares, instead of triangles? Because, we like a little bit of change, a little bit of variety. So why aren't some of the hot new cars coming out having triangular wheels? Looks cool, doesn't it? Neon orange, chrome triangles, violent, the hard-ass, badass, whatever. The things that this cult thinks are impressive, right? Why not? Well, if you do a revolution, if you drive a car with triangular wheels, you have a heck of a bumpy ride. By the time you're driving, 30 miles an hour, you've got a headache, your head is banging on the top of the roof of the car, you can't think straight, the car is lifting off the ground as you're getting traction and going from the tip of the triangle down to the bottom. It doesn't sink fast enough, so you're floating off the ground, so you're skidding sideways. A triangular card wheel is wonderful from a system tracking point of view. If you want to design a triangle, it's pretty simple. And you can hold 3 points in focus. The left bit, the right bit, and the bottom bit, right? It's a nice, simple system. We can keep track of it. Whereas a circle is an infinite number of dots, an infinite number of planes refracted into a circle. And so when we're dealing with reality through a mental paradigm, we're compressing it into heuristic models of reality that relate to the low RAM capacity of human consciousness. And so we want at most a 10-point system, and we can't remember them all. You're unlikely to remember all of the 10 Commandments. I just learned that coveting thy neighbor's oxen made the list. And so it's like, that's on there? You're a rancher and your neighbor has nicer, a bigger herd of nicer cows, and you look over there and you think, God, I wish I had cows like that. And suddenly you've broken the 10 Commandments. I mean, we've forgotten about that because why? Our brain prioritized the first 3 or 4. That actually made sense. Coveting thy neighbor's oxen is not a planetary threat now or in the foreseeable future. Stealing, murdering, adultery, enough of those could actually disrupt evolution, or ensure the planet doesn't survive, particularly with the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. It just takes one, angry husband whose wife was coveted or adulterous, and you've got millions of people dead. So, but oxen, have not been a big issue for some time. But, a list of 10, the 10 Commandments, the 7 habits of highly effective people, we like this because it's only 7. It's like I can remember those. Now, what are they? What are all 7 of the habits of highly effective people? Listen first, to be understood. Sharpen the saw. It's like we're dealing with very limited bandwidth. Now, what a system does is it takes you around the circle at a more sophisticated level than you're able to do within all the distractions of human life intuitively. That's why you need a written, clear, structured system, is it will take you around the circle in a way that is disorienting because you're so small. We are so small in relationship to the vastness of life. So we need a map. It's like a system is a map. Now, when you look at Google Maps, it is not reality. Reality is reality. Google Maps are not reality. They're a version of reality that is simple. Google Maps tells you the names of the street and whether they're right, left, or straight ahead. That's simple, isn't it? You see, remember the limited brain capacity? So right, left, straight ahead. I can do that. Is it MacArthur Street or Franklin Street? I can do that. Great. We've reduced reality down to a heuristic model that is so simple that even you and I, with our limited RAM capacity, can tell the difference. No, that's Franklin. This is 4th Street. I'm not going to confuse those two. They're different enough that I'll notice the difference. And so what Google is going to do is it's going to follow along at my little narrow RAM level. It's going to say turn left at 4th Street. And it's not going to overwhelm me. It's not going to say and then turn right at 7th and then drive 2.8 miles, turn left at the subway, do the... No, because remember, we're simple. So we're going to drive. And it'll say, coming up in 200 yards, you're going to turn left on 4th. Now, 50 yards, turn left on 4th shortly. Now turn left on 4th. Oh my goodness, we managed to succeed because it's such a simple model of reality. And if Google gave us the counts of the asphalt, drive through 389 million chunks of asphalt, and then head 2.8 degrees west on the street that has a tree with 380,000 leaves on it, bear in the direction of the setting sun. It's like Google, that's too complicated. I can't count all the leaves on those trees. So we overlay we named the streets because we couldn't remember details. Why do we have street names? Why don't we just say, turn left at the red house that has shutters that have painted irises on them, and then walk past this house and this house and this house? Oh my gosh, I can't remember all that. So realize that what we do as human beings to navigate the world is, first of all, we dissociate from the world to some degree because it's too complicated. Secondly, we lay a map of language over it, which covers the distinctions that we think are relevant. Now, an Eskimo has 400 words for snow because whether snow is liquid cooling towards ice or whether snow is ice melting towards liquid, or whether it's ice melting towards liquid in a 20% slope, meaning every hour it's 20% more in this direction, versus 40 or 80%. These distinctions make the difference between life and death for an Eskimo, not for you and I. We call it snow. At best, if we're skiers, we say it's powder or it's slush, right? Pretty basic. It's powder, it's slush, it's all snow. That's all we need, right? But the Eskimo needs 400 distinctions. Because when setting out on a 4-hour journey at 40 degrees below zero in rising wind, the difference between 10 minutes can be the difference between life and death. And the difference between 10 minutes is the difference between snow 378 moving towards snow 360, and the difference between snow 400 and snow moving towards 460, or 380. So that's a 10-minute difference. And that 10-minute difference in extreme situations is the difference between life and death. So you need more and more zoom-in detail when you're dealing with life and death. And so that's kind of how we develop language. And as a capitalist cult, in a capitalist culture that elevates money over the human beings that make them, we have a lot of financial distinctions. We have, underlying assets. Then we have derivatives. Then we have derivatives of derivatives. And then we have futures and options to trade derivatives of derivatives. That's how important we've elevated bits of paper in our culture. So, or digits, depending on where and what form your money takes. And so in a system where turning a 1 into a 2 is the great accomplishment of the year. I had $1, and then I made 100% profit in 1 year, and now it's $2. It's amazing. When this is the pinnacle of the accomplishment for a year, then you need all kinds of, complicated system vocabulary to analyze and navigate, ROI, return on investment, and risk management, and diversification. And so basically, any area that we get fixated and linked to our survival, our ideals, our self-esteem, etc., our human needs, we develop maps of reality that are more and more distinct. We're quite happy using a 10 to 15 color vocabulary. Computers break them down to 256 million colors. We're happy drawing a circle and saying that's a wheel. A computer will create a circle out of millions of dots and lines. So this is just the territory. And for most of humanity, this is already too complicated. What's the point? What's the point? Why isn't the system over by now? So we like simple. We like to reduce things to their smallest, simplest common denominator so that we don't have to develop and exercise our brains. The problem with that is, as I say, a triangular wheel is more violent to drive than a square wheel. A square wheel is more violent to drive than a pentagon, than a hexagon, than an octagon. In other words, the more complicated the system, the harder it is for human RAM. The more complicated the system, the more it moves towards grace. Because the most graceful ride in the universe is a sphere. It takes less energy to transport, whether in rail, whether in cars, whether in propellers, it takes less energy to move energy from this location to this location in a sphere than any other shape. Now, in two-dimensional, you can reduce that to a wheel, but we're still talking about a very interesting geometrical shape, because a sphere, a circle, is both one. So you have the unconscious, the feminine, the unity, the whole, and it is infinite. Because just like you can take the color wheel and you can refract it into 7 colors, the colors of the rainbow, most of us can do that. You can refract it into 10 colors, a little shade. You can refract it into 64 colors. Like if you order an elaborate artist colored pencil set or paint colors, they maybe will send you 64 different colored pencil. And there's cayenne and navy and utopian and all these different colors that they have to be called something. They're just different points on the infinite color wheel. And a computer will say, hey, I've got lots of RAM and processing power. Let me show off. I can make 256 million colors out of the exact same color wheel, out of the one. It's one. It's color. One. It's a color wheel. There it is. Do you want to move in increments of millimeters or inches or feet? That determines how many distinctions there are on the color spectrum. There are an infinite number of colors. There are an infinite number of planes that refract to create a sphere. There are an infinite number of dots, depends how big they are, right? That can form a sphere or a circle. Or there's just one. It's one circle and it's infinite lines. It's one sphere or infinite dots. It's one or it's infinite dimensions. So you have this paradox in the sphere. It is the one and the infinite. The masculine, the infinite, the lines, the dots, the feminine, the curve, the one. You have consciousness. Very basic consciousness when you just say we're all one. That's a very low level of consciousness. But it becomes more and more complicated as you break the one into its refracted distinctions. You say this is blue and this is red. Now you're conscious of 2 things. You say this is yellow. Now you're conscious of 3 things. This is a yellow triangle with a red square. You're conscious of shape distinction and color distinction. Then you say this is a big one and a small one. Now you're conscious of size distinctions. Now, as you refract the infinite one, as you refract the whole into a larger and larger number of distinctions, you become conscious. The world becomes bigger and bigger. And this is why the most educated people on the planet that are truly educated are the ones talking about how little they know. Because when you really grasp 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 and 1/10 of 1/10 of the multiverse, what you're struck with is how small what you know is in comparison to all that you don't know. And you can extrapolate what you don't know beyond what you don't know that you don't know. So, I mean, we're dealing a lot of stuff out there that I don't even know that I don't know. Do you know the distance between star Z2 and star Z54? I don't even know that I don't know that until I put it into words. Now that I've put that into words, I know that I don't know that. Okay, there's a trillion other stars out there that I haven't yet put into words. Well, I can group them as a general category. I don't know that I don't know any of that. Or I know that I don't know any of those distances. And then, of course, if I do know them and then they move a few minutes later, now they've got new distances. So did I know that I don't know that? So the more you know, the more you realize that there is far more to know than the human ego zoom-in lens can possibly know. And so what systems do is they allow us to navigate through life that is bigger than our ability to get into focus. So, for example, if you don't know that the painting is a Mona Lisa, if you don't even know that it's a figure, and you're dealing with zoom-in lens, you're zooming in on the painting here and there, and you can't see the detail. It seems black. Is this a bad painting? Well, you could be looking at the black of her eyes. Is it a bad painting? Is it a sinister painting? Over here, there's white. This black seems very stark. So we're explorers at this micro zoom-in level. We have no idea what we're looking at. But it's very big. And we cannot comprehend the full complexity of reality within the paradigm of language and human consciousness. But we've got to give it a shot, because human consciousness is the single largest force on the planet today in terms of the variables between a sustainable, healthy culture of high intelligence and well-being, a world that blows itself up, a world that is hit by an asteroid and destroyed, a world that goes to war and kills half of itself regularly. Human consciousness, our map of reality, is the biggest force on the planet today that is the tipping point between a future of magnificent intelligence, beauty, truth, and goodness, and evolution, and the entire planetary experiment being reduced to rubble by autonomous nuclear deployment of all the nuclear weapon stock on the planet. For example, we're about 30 years away from having intelligence systems that are so fast and so complicated. See, we look at the color system. I'm like, we're really impressed. We can do the colors of the rainbow. Can you? Can you name 30 colors? An artist could, because it's their vocabulary. But you and I, 30? Could we get 30 colors? 40? How about 100,000 colors? How about 100 million colors? How about 256 million colors on a measly $300 laptop? A $300 laptop can outperform 5 billion years of evolution, can outperform Plato, can outperform Aristotle, can outperform the best chess player on the planet. There isn't even time for the human brain to say color 1, color 2, color million and 1, color billion, color 200 million and 2. There isn't even enough time for the human brain to get it clear in its mind what it doesn't know, it doesn't know. Now that's computing intelligence today. In 2 seconds, a computer can navigate between 256 million colors that would take years to get wrong for a human being. That's today. And these technologies are on exponential curves. Exponential curves meaning they're speeding up. So you're going from 5 to 10 miles an hour, and then from 10 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour, and then from 15 to 20, so they're speeding up, but the speed at which they are speeding up is speeding up. That is just there. That simple thing, which a computer can track out very nicely, is beyond most people's ability to intuit. It's speeding up, and the speed at which it's speeding up is speeding up. It's like speeding up is enough. It's like in 20 years, if it keeps on this lineal curve, I can possibly grasp that, though it seems a bit much, right, for the human brain. But speeding up, that it's speeding up, this is a riddle, right? It's like, I can't deal with that. Can you? Speeding up, that it's speeding up? But it is. It's doing it, and we're participating in it, and we can't grasp what that means. But one of the things it means is that within 30 years, the decision-making technology of sifting between billions of distinctions and data points is going to be beyond the human RAM level to comprehend. Meaning, we will be in terrain where what we have given birth to is not only more complex and more sophisticated than we can predict, but is more complex than we can understand that we cannot predict. Meaning, we are creating patterns of energy that are unknown unknowns faster than a human brain could decipher. Meaning, if you took the most brilliant 5 people on the planet today and asked them to figure out with the human brain what an AI did with what information and why, and what the AI would likely do based on its past pattern of behavior and why. 5 people, the smartest people in the room, including the coders that wrote the original code that was iterated 1 billion times in a week by a self-iterating object. They could not figure out reliably why something happened and what would be likely to happen again with a high degree of certainty. 5 people could spend an entire lifetime analyzing 3 seconds of such an algorithm and not come up with higher than 80% certainty. I mean, they could say, well, I think this and this and this and probably that and this, but it's like, I don't know why it did that. You see, do you know why, if you use Microsoft Word, why sometimes when you press the bullet point, it goes there, and then sometimes you have to delete and press the bullet point again, and then you have to go up to the font before it and press backspace and try. You have to experiment to try and figure out why the hell does doing this one time produce this effect, and then later in the document, it produces this other effect. So we don't actually know why that is. And it might take me a year to learn the vocabulary of training, to go in, to read that, to read this and that and the other. And it's like, oh my goodness, isn't it wonderful? I understand why this happened here. But here's the scary thing. You call up top tech support and say, okay, I'm at line 380 in my Word document, and the same button that I press at line 20 that does this, at 380, does this other thing. And it's only doing it today. Do you have any idea why that's happening? Now, they'll have hacks. They'll say, well, try this. Try restarting the computer. But they don't know what's going on with a 20-year-old rustic operating system. They don't know what's going on. They just have more tips about how to get you to pass through the mystery of coding and chips and electrical systems and laptops and Windows 5.0 and Windows 10.9, and they have, try this. Try these little tricks, the little spells. Abracadabra. press restart and do this and see what happens there. Try Open Sesame. Try tripping the Shift key and doing this and this and this. Does it work? Okay, try doing this. Download a new system of Windows. Anything but actually understand what the issue is. Because if we were dealing with a high level of competency, they would say, okay, open up. Let's go through its code line 640. That was the time Microsoft switched from this employee, who had an affair with this other employee against company policy, was fired. They brought in a temp agency, and they didn't connect this line of code. That's why that happens, and it happens at this thing on this version of this and this and this. And we fixed it. We've gone in there. We've rewritten that 0 and 1. Now it's fine. We're not at that level of competency. We don't see, we don't know, and we can't repair. We hack. We go around. We say, okay, there's a boulder in the center of the highway. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Tell you what, why don't you drive back 5 miles, head over to this other side street, go down there and see if there are any boulders on that road. Oh, there's nothing there. Okay, let's just reroute traffic permanently for millions of people down the back roads because we don't know what to do with a boulder in the middle of the highway. How did it get there? Was it the rain? Was it a terrorist? Did it fall off a semi-truck? We just don't have the technology. So this is consciousness hell. We lack the competency to engage with reality at the level of complexity at which it is happening. So we develop simplified heuristic models of reality that are so wonderful, aren't they? Oh, now I get it. The 7 habits of highly effective people. I thought there were 256 million habits of different moments at different times with different cultures, at different, with different currencies. I thought there were all those habits. 7. Isn't it wonderful? Which 7 should I do? Should I sharpen my saw? But what if it's raining tomorrow, and I'm sharpening my saw because that's the 7th habit, but then it rained and the tree that I was going to cut fell down the cliff. See, that wasn't on the 7 habits of highly effective people. I've been ripped off. The system wasn't complicated enough to deal with the underlying reality. But it's very comforting that it works, what? Most of the time. Some of the time? That's a good start. Some of the time? 50-50? Better than some of the time. 65%? You see, the casinos in Vegas are very, very happy with 60% odds in their favor. If you place 100 bets with 60-40 odds, 98% of the people are going to walk out having given all their money to the Vegas casinos. So all you need when you have a system of dealing with reality is it's a system of bets. Nothing's guaranteed. It's a system of bets. And in those system of bets, you want to have a betting system that delivers higher than 50-50 odds. Now, if you can get 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, well, the better the ratio of success. Success at what? Fulfilling your human needs and the underlying direction of increasing sustainable well-being and avoiding feeling chronically bad. That's the game. So you're moving in that direction. So human needs, a system of meeting your human needs developed by Abraham Maslow, is a system for doing what? For moving towards feeling sustainably good and avoiding feeling chronically bad. Evolution is a system of moving towards complexity. Life starts off very simple and very unconscious. And it moves in diversity and complexity, diversity and complexity. And in part of that mathematical formula, if you create enough complexity, you give birth to every possibility. So, for example, if you want to locate an atom on the color wheel, having a 256 million system color wheel is way better than a 7-point color wheel. What are your odds of hitting one atom when your grid is 7 on an infinite sphere? Very low. The more distinction you have, the more likelihood you have of being able to consistently locate a possibility. There is a possibility field, an infinite possibility field, but it is released through complexity. An infinitely complex system contains every possibility in the multiverse. Obviously, a multiverse is more complex than a universe. A universe is more complex than a galaxy. A galaxy is more complex than a solar system, and a solar system is more complex than a planet. A planet is more complex than a species. A species is more complex than a country. A country is more complex than a family. A family is more complex than an individual. And an individual is more complex than an atom, where you see the solar system again. And an atom is more complex than the subatomic particles that comprise the atoms. And as far as we know, these directions of fractal representations of patterns of reality interacting with reality are an infinite mathematical formula. An infinite mathematical formula. So here we are. And this is all context. This is all context for part 2, in which we're going to look at a couple of different core systems of human needs and well-being.